I am very happy to be able to come back. So when I have the opportunity to come back, I felt obliged to contribute to your work, because recently I heard that your institute has become one of the leading, one of important think tanks, not only in Ireland but also in Europe. Although I'm neither a negotiator for TTIP nor a real expert in international trade, I still want to do something. So today's topic is China's response to transatlantic trade and investment partnership negotiations. My talk will consist of 5 parts: some background, and what TTIP is, and maybe another parallel project or proposal for FTA dominated by U.S. Trans-Pacific partnership. Also some views from Chinese scholars, Chinese think tanks, and also some policies of Chinese government to respond. Although these policies are not solely as a response to this TTIP, the development, but maybe TTIP is also one of the factors that lead to these changes. For the context, the first hypothesis is the emerging hypothesis of decline of West. But of course, now it's changing, is controversial, and whether there is a real decline of West and the rise of emerging powers. So here I quoted this from American columnist. We are now living through the third great power shift of the modern era. The first was the rise of Western world around 15th century. The second, the rise of the United States in 19th century, is now the third, called the rise of the West. In other contexts, impacts of some crises, some ongoing crises, I think you are familiar with. We do not have time for elaboration. The global financial crisis, European sovereign debt crisis, rise of China, or maybe threat of China? No, I'm not quite sure. What's your view on it? And the U.S. tried to desperately maintain its world hegemony. EU tried to desperately avoid the collapse of the Eurozone and even the Union. A new scenario is that maybe some so-called new normal of Chinese economy. This is a term from President Xi Jinping, some slowing down of Chinese economy. So we are not so confident now, maybe, as 3 years ago when the EU and the US decided to start the negotiation for TTIP. And also whether China will have a middle income trap. And actually, over the past few months, even during my visit, I heard a lot of bad news, a lot of bad data, bad figures on Chinese economy. So maybe this is an interesting moment to look at this issue. So, under its political, that is, what's the importance of EU in U.S. strategic thinking? A few years ago, some American economists coined the term G2, or China-America. Maybe a Chinese government would not like to accept it, but now we are very comfortable with the so-called new type of great power relationship. This is China's expression, official expression. At beginning, actually, we had thought that this can be applied to all the major powers, including EU, UK. But now it seems it has become more and more inclusive, only refer to the relationship with the United States. So President Obama's Asia strategy, pivot to Asia, Ukraine crisis and its impact. So a lot of maybe conflicting trends or events in the international political and the economic relations. So next we come to the story, the road to TTIP. TTIP actually is not a new idea. In 1990s, I think it has been a natural logic. That means these transatlantic partners should have some closer relationship in trade, So in the 1990s, at that time the Spanish leader and the American leader proposed. So in 2007, some institutional development emerged, the Transatlantic Economic Council. However, it has not been a very successful story. No major breakthrough had been made by 2012 or early 2013. A major barrier actually comes from the European Union. In the so-called competitive interdependence, that means the trade relations between, or economic relations between the United States and European Union. European Union has the advantage of the commitment to, that means the multilateralism. For European Union, the WTO should be the cornerstone. Maybe the United States tend to have more new liberalism or liberalization of trade. So in the 1990s, the United States started to build more and more FTAs, bigger one, the regional, the NAFTA, and a lot of FTAs in North America, in Asia. So at the beginning, the EU was reluctant to do that. That means that would constitute some challenge or threat to the primacy of the WTO. However, gradually, under the economic pressure, maybe in 2005 or 2006, at that time Commissioner Mandelson, he introduced a new strategy for trade policy in the European Union, Global Europe. Maybe that indicated some shift towards liberalism and mercantilism in EU trade policy. So in another, maybe this is also a factor, maybe impetus for the move toward this TTIP. That was a stalemate and very disappointing development of WTO as the major institution for international trade. Maybe Doha, I cannot remember how many years we talk about Doha. However, the negotiations have never been concluded. It seems no promising. Under this context, more and more FTAs, some bilateral, regional, or even plurilateral agreements have been concluded. The so-called proliferation of FTAs. Some economists believe that now every country is undergoing a lot of negotiations, on average maybe 12, 10 FTAs with other countries. Or even EU participates in some plural arrangement. That means for facilitating trade in service industry. This is why these major countries try to seek some new arrangements beyond WTO or outside WTO. So finally, at the end of 2012, EU and the United States decided to move on. In June 2013, EU-US officially declared to start the negotiations. So far, 7 rounds of negotiations have been conducted. The 8th one, I think, is underway currently for some details on regulatory issues. But it seems that now the negotiations are disappointing, not so smooth. EU and the US had hoped to conclude the negotiations by the end of 2014, but obviously it's not likely, not possible. Now for this September or this October, because some believe that negotiations should be concluded before the US general election. I mean, in case the Republican win, maybe the chance is very slim now for maybe the danger risk for this. But it seems it's not very likely to conclude the negotiation. A lot of differences in some regulatory, particularly in some regulatory issues. Obviously, the TTIP has a huge advantage. Some think tank in Europe made some report. It boosts the growth. Obviously, this is an unprecedented FTA, large market in human history. The total GDP may account for maybe less than 40% of the world. Investment, trade accounts for maybe about 60%. More employment. It will be a zero tariff. That means remove the tariff and maybe most of the non-tariff barriers for trade. Of course, it's a good thing. But there are some barriers, some constraints. Agriculture, obviously, the CAP, international climate change regime, clean energy, food safety. Maybe the European Union, for example, has maybe strict rules on this. Even cultural industry, the famous, maybe the French worries over maybe the Hollywood film's dominance over, from actually 20 or 30 years ago, they wage a war, a battle against the influence of American films. But now it's still an issue. So the prospects, maybe a full success or partial, maybe this is a likely result. Successful on tariff issues, but with some compromises on regulatory issues. Failure is also possible, but maybe it involves huge political and economic risk because both sides invested a lot. It will weaken the confidence in. So a parallel story is called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's actually another one, another efforts for free trade agreements dominated by the United States, including 12 Pacific countries, Japan, Singapore, or even Vietnam. So it's very controversial. That means whether this or TTIP or TPP are economic or political. For United States and the European Union, they argue it's mainly, officially, they argue it's mainly economic, only for trade, for growth, for job. But some observers believe both TTIP and the TPP are exclusive of third countries like China. Of course, some other concerns may be better position EU member countries for the rise of Asian challenges, helping EU out of crisis, and also has the prospects of sustaining Western leadership over the global trade system, or from European Union perspective, maybe it can have the function of diversion of the U.S. pivot to Asia. In a Financial Times article, I also argue that the central objective of the Trans-Pacific or TTIP trade negotiations is the exclusion of China. That is to build anyone but China club. Because obviously China cannot join the TTIP, but some people argue that TPP is open to China. However, Chinese government refused to join the negotiations for TPP, but would prefer finalizing the Doha round with WTO and establishing more or less exclusive plurilateral, bilateral, or regional trade agreements. So next, I will give very brief, I'm conscious of time, of the responses from Chinese scholars or think tanks. Recently, Chinese government stressed the importance of think tanks in decision making. Chinese scholars' view on TTIP, TPP is divided. One camp regards it as Western geopolitical strategy to dominate international rules and norms and isolate China. I read some report from some leading think tanks in China. They give this view. They even said that it was the total geopolitical project. That means it's a huge threat to China. Actually, Chinese government was very concerned about development in early 2013. A lot of discussions on the impact of this kind of move. So the other camp is rooted in economics, particularly China's recently announced reform projects. Their view is that TTIP and TPP can be used as external impetus to drive domestic economic reforms in much the same way as WTO accession was 20 years ago. The middle ground, this is also my view. In my paper, actually, I wrote this. That is the TTIP and TTP is definitely not purely economic, but possibility exists between China and the West for making dialogue and building a consensus on international norms and rules. Both China and the West have the dual identity of both challenger, revisionist, and defender of existing international rules and norms. For some international relations scholars, they tend to believe China is a challenger, is a revisionist for existing maybe international order or international norms and rules. But of course, obviously, we have different views, and maybe China is becoming more and more aggressive in recent years, more assertive. However, in international trade norms and rules, it seemed to me that actually the Western countries, the United States and the European Union, actually are trying to revise, trying to change the system. For example, maybe in the existing rules, WTO actually no quite clear rules on exchange rate, on environmental issues. So maybe the Western countries actually are trying to insert such rules. China actually have benefited hugely from the existing system over the past decades. So maybe we just try to preserve the status quo. But also some other observations, China and other emerging powers are too big to be isolated. That means no one can ignore the existence. That means even though the TTIP is successful, the United States and the EU cannot dominate the rules. China needs to actively participate in agenda setting and rule making in the new global and regional order. This does not necessarily mean a zero-sum game between China and the West, as some other scholars suggested. Actually, this is also an opportunity even for China to modernize our governance, to adopt some rules, actually even some Western rules, but we have to take into account our own interests. I mean, this is again a consensus building process in climate change, in clean energy, or even food safety. Not necessarily means something bad. So China's responses, some maybe, as I said, maybe these are not necessarily responses directly related to TTIP, but obviously for China, we believe that in this context, the European Union is a very, very valuable partner. So we hope to strengthen our relations with the European Union. Over the past 2 or 3 years, we have had several reports. Of course, a general agreement or general document, general paper, policy paper, was called China-EU 2020 Strategic Agenda for Cooperation, this bilateral paper. We are also trying to conclude the negotiations for comprehensive EU-China investment agreement. China is very keen for joint feasibility study on China-EU free trade agreement. Of course, this is a very difficult task, very ambitious. But anyway, last spring, EU agreed in principle to start the study on the feasibility of comprehensive FTA between EU and China. The last one is the rescue for Greece. This new story I added on the road during my trip, because yesterday to Bangor, to Wales yesterday, because I found the news. I mean, Chinese premier made a phone call to Greek leaders to promise to give some support. This reminds me of some discussion 1 year ago, maybe at the end of 2013 or early. Some of the Chinese think tanks, actually, they said that they felt very regretful for Chinese government not to rescue Europe in the second half of 2011. I mean, they believe Chinese government could or should have done more in the most difficult times of European Union in 2011. However, at that time, some investment banks in China gave some opinion to the Chinese government. IR scholars, I mean, international relations scholars, persuaded Chinese government to do more. The investment bank were very pessimistic about the future of Europe. They said the euro would collapse. If you buy the bonds, maybe you lose a lot of money. But anyway, this time Chinese government indicated, but also actually Greece has very good relations with Chinese government. The previous government agreed to give consent for Chinese to invest in a port. This is the Chinese government is very happy about that. The second one is so-called the road and the belt strategy. This is a new buzzword of Chinese government. Everybody in China, even in university, that means universities are encouraged to become think tanks now in China. So everybody talk about so-called road and the belt. Road means the Silk Road. I think you know Silk Road. Yes. It's icon in history in Han Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, for trade with Central Asia, Arabian countries. So we use that. So that is the Silk Road economic belt, refer to the Central Asia, the Arabian countries. Maybe interesting is which will be the end point of this belt. Maybe Italy, Rome, because in history, Greece, Italy, it was the end point, or even Berlin, Germany. But anyway, and also actually the Central and Eastern European countries are very interested. So no matter whether the Western European countries, UK would be part of that, if some Central and Eastern European countries join this process, maybe this will have some impact on European Union, because you have the free trade area, you have the union, or even full, very advanced economic and monetary union. So the other one is called the Maritime Silk Road, the Southeast Asian islands. This is so the strategy, I think in October 2013, President Xi made the official proposal initiative for this strategy. So it means, of course, mutual benefits, solution to Chinese production, maybe overproduction or overcapacity in some way. This is now our problem in this recent story. And some new financial institutions in Asia or BRIC countries. Connectivity, this is a keyword. It can mean different things. Actually, the United States several years also had such a strategy, so-called the Silk Road. Connectivity can mean internet, or can also mean some training for understanding, so that means a connection in different ways. It can mean building of infrastructure. This is most important part, maybe. Infrastructure, the roads, airport, the high-speed train. This is another interest of China. We believe we have very good technology, so we can invest. We have money. We have the technology. We have the labor. So that's the and also the cultural connections, the so-called people-to-people exchange. So another related story is the APEC summit last year. It was an event in China. We had several days extra holidays in Beijing.
Skies.
Blue skies. So yes, this is the revitalizing the APEC. That means we give new importance to APEC and the regional cooperation because over the past one decade at least, in Chinese strategic thinking, APEC was marginalized. Actually, we didn't like APEC because too much American and Japanese influence in APEC. But this time we took this opportunity of the summit. We reasserted our influence, and other countries actually are all the other members, including the United States, are very supportive. They give what we want to. Yes, we again another FTAAP, another free trade agreement. This again is not a new idea. The relevant country talked about for many years. However, it's very difficult for these APEC countries for free trade agreement. No progress for many years. This time, Chinese government officially gave the initiative for promoting the process, and all the other countries agree. So this is collective strategic studies. Now this is in APEC declaration. But obviously, this is a very difficult task. Maybe for foreseeable future, it's not likely to happen. But anyway, these countries show their will to start the process. And also, actually, it could include the TPP, and some other regional. It's a bigger project. This is also what Chinese government would like to see. So some other things, we are accelerating the negotiations for more bilateral FTAs. We have had FTA with ASEAN countries. We had FTA with Switzerland. It's on Euro with the European country. And also before the APEC summit, we declared that we almost concluded our negotiations with Korea, with Australia, faster than most people had expected. So another is this photo. This is a new type of great power relationship. We believe that this is very important. This is another gesture during following the APEC summit. During his visit to China, President Obama and President Xi Jinping announced both countries will curb greenhouse gas emissions over the next 2 decades. The United States would cut its 2005 level of carbon emission by 26 to 28% before the year 2025. China would peak our carbon emission by 2030, and will also aim to get 20% of energy from zero carbon emission sources same year. The first time China, this is very important, but of course, some critics still argue that it's only maybe a utopian plan, because maybe U.S. Congress would not support this kind of agreement. This is only a gesture. However, anyway, in history, this is the first time the United States gave a very clear target for the reduction, and China promised to have a peak for emission, because our previous view has long been that we can cut emission, but we cut emission by maybe per unit of GDP. We could cut emission by 40 or 50% per unit of GDP, but over for example, 8 or 10 years, but because of high growth in the GDP, so the total emission would still increase by 50%. So this is maybe the first time. And also, the two countries claim our leadership. This is not a good thing for European Union, because the European Union believe is a leader in the world. But United States and China said we are the leaders, even in climate change. So lastly, maybe China is trying to deepen our domestic reform agenda. We established some so-called FTZ, free trade zones, that means some domestic free trade areas for some experiments in different policies to open further to outside world. In Shanghai or some other countries now, and other cities, other provinces are very interested. It seems that Fujian, Guangdong, Tianjin have got the support from the government. More are applying for this kind of experiment. Chinese government believe that it's very important for us to have a grand strategy to address the challenges, to best plan and coordinate the domestic and external strategies. So this is my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much.